You've worked your whole life to get here. The last thing you should worry about is running out of money. Safe Money Radio, real strategies for guaranteed retirement income. I'm Brett Blake. Let's make sure your money lasts as long as you do. Guests and friends, welcome to this episode of Safe Money Radio. My name is Brett Blake. I'm your host for today, and we have a special guest with us with over 35 years of experience in the life insurance and the annuity space. But he comes to us with a really unique insight as he helps his mother and mother-in-law navigate through retirement, and he and his wife have entered the years of retirement. So he's going to bring to us both a personal and a professional insight that I can't wait to be able to explore with him. Before we get into that, let me just introduce you all to our guest today. I'm so excited to have a good friend, Bart Catmull, join us. Bart is a former president and CEO of Sagicor Life Insurance Company. He has more than 35 years in life insurance industry. Bart has dedicated his career to helping individuals and families make sound financial decisions. Today, we're going to discuss the importance of life insurance, annuities, long-term care planning, and why, as Bart says, quote, a little planning goes a long way. Bart, welcome to Safe Money Radio. How are you today?
Hey, it's really good to be with you, Brett. Thanks for having me on.
It's great to be. Now, will you start by giving people just a little snapshot into your life? You've spent most of your career on the East Coast in Florida for a little while, and then you wanted to get a little touch of cold up north and have migrated down, at least for a period of time, to help out your mother and mother-in-law here in Arizona. If you don't mind just kind of sharing that, I think it'll be relevant to many people who are listening.
Well, yeah. So I started my career in public accountant. I was one of those nerdy accountants, auditors, and I spent a fair amount of years in that career on the East Coast, in Connecticut, New Jersey. My wife and I have always talked about that if we're going to make a move, we don't make a move down the street, we make a move across the country. So we bounce back and forth across the country. And then about almost 8 years into my career, I left public accounting and joined at the time, a very small insurance company, life insurance company based in Arizona. And over the years with them, we took that company from, um, a small $15 million a year type business to over 400 million
Wow.
annually. So, and definitely went through many different iterations as far as the economy. Went through the crashes in 08, 09, COVID, numerous other different downturns. So it was an interesting ride that we had there and with that company.
Yeah, for sure. I know we've talked before. You speak fondly. You had great people you worked with there, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I really I went into the job, leaving public accounting, going into this company, and it was really, I didn't really understand life insurance. I understood the business. I had audited the companies for a number of years. And so I understood the business, or I thought I understood the business, but I really didn't understand just what a life insurance company is all about. And the fact that most of the people that work for these life insurers, I mean, it's more than a career. It's a way of life. They're really focused on helping individuals, their communities survive kind of what can be some of the worst experiences, right? I mean, you have somebody who
Right.
passes away when they're young, or you have grandpa and grandma die. That's not a necessarily a wonderful time of life, right? But that's what these companies are all focused on, and helping individuals and families not only survive those experiences but thrive afterwards. So
So, what did you learn along the way? I mean, did you come in as a kind of a big life insurance and annuity person, or did you kind of become acclimated a little bit and learn along the way?
yeah, no, I definitely came in more from the, the geeky financial guy, right? The debits and credits, the dollars, everything had to, dollars and cents, and I really didn't understand the products, and actually for a few years that was all was asked of me. I was the chief financial officer for the company, and the president. All he really wanted me to do was keep track of the dollars and cents,
Mm,
and but as I progressed in the company and as I matured in the industry, and as things changed and I took on different responsibilities, I was really forced to understand more of the products, to interact with not only the agents but also the consumers, the policyholders. And when you take a call from someone who has just lost their mother or their father, and they're trying to figure out what they had, right? What their mom had put away, and at this time you feel the emotion in their
mm,
voice. It begins to change you, and then as you work on understanding the products and how each product can be used, and the differences. Some of them aren't good for, not every product is good for everyone, and I think that that's true in any industry, but especially true in the life and annuity side, where yeah, there are products that aren't meant for a 25-year-old. There are products that aren't meant for a 90-year-old, and understanding how those interact, and what we need to do as a company to provide the best possible um, solution for our policyholders was a big part of what I learned over those years.
I think a lot of people look at life insurance companies and it's kind of like a black box. It's like, you hear the name, you see the commercials on television. Um, they don't really know a lot about what goes on behind the scenes to make sure that the company has the money to pay out policies, that they protect the annuity money that they have. You served both as a chief financial officer and then later in life as a chief risk officer. Can you just talk a little bit about the disciplines required and from good money
Oh yeah.
management for those carriers?
Yeah. So, I mean, not only do you have the accountants, but then you have the actuaries, you have the claims folks that are focused, you have the investment folks who are focused on, what type of investments, and so an insurance, and then you have the compliance folks that deal with the regulators, right? And so you've got all of these individuals that come together to create a product, and those products have to, when you sell a product to someone, they're going to give you money, right? They're going to give some of their hard earned resources to you as a company. And there's a trust there and a promise that we're going to be around. And so to fulfill that promise, you have experts, the actuaries, who um, kind of create a plan as far as how much is going to be needed and when the cash is going to, that person may need that cash, and they're going to create a plan that way, and then that plan is then used by the investment folks to determine how much money we need to invest into the market and what type of investments it needs to be. In some cases, a product may be shorter term in nature. And so you're not going to invest that in real estate because that's a long term play. You may need to invest it just in a bond that's safe. Um, and then you have the claims folks who are going to deal with those folks and make sure, well, and you're going to have the compliance folks who that product is going to go, and it's going to go before the state, regulators to make sure that it meets the qualifications that they've placed in there. And on a regular basis, all of these individuals we're going to have a report that's going to go to the state to let them know that, hey, it's working as we said it would. And all of that is behind the scenes to help support a product that is going, once again, is going to be there in one of those trying times. It may be um, a loss of a loved one, or it may be retirement, and the person now no longer has a paycheck coming in, and their assets are expected to help fund their lifestyle now for the next 20, 30, 40 years.
I appreciate that. So let's talk about that aspect, the human side of this. I think people tune into Safe Money Radio and they think we're going to talk about money for sure, but they're not clear about why we're talking to an insurance guy per se about retirement. And we're going to get into that a little bit more. But I just want to go back to the personal side of this. You've been retired a little bit, selective retirement, and you're, like I said, you're caring for family members through retirement. What have you learned in your retirement that you wish you would have understood in your career?
Well, I think you always you because of my situation where I had to retire earlier than the government says that you should retire. So there's a lot of expenses that I've had to fund myself, and so I think I one of the things that I wish I would have thought through more was, okay, I need to have, not only do I need to have assets, retirement assets that per se, but I also need living assets that can help um, fund those expenses. Um, I think it's so important that we take good care of ourselves. One of
Mm,
the biggest expenses that you have, especially if you retire prior to, um, where you can take Medicare, is you have medical expenses, and those can be devastating. And when you're working, you've got cash coming in. When you're not working, then you really have to. It can be a struggle. And so I think that, telling my younger self to even put more money aside for those kind of expenses is important. But I can tell you, one of the things that really has hit me is as I've been working with my mom and my mother-in-law, and I remember a few years before my father passed away, I would come and visit them, and I was working, and I would come, and he would be so stressed out. He had money in the market, and he would talk to me, and I would say, Dad, you know, if you don't want to have that risk, there are things you can do to relieve that stress. You don't need to, you're not going to make as much money. You're not going to get the size of return that you may see in the market, but you're not going to have the stress either. Over a few years, I would come out here like every other month. I was out and I would be staying with them, and he was all stressed out for
hmm.
like a year and a half. He would just, every time. And I finally convinced him, listen, let's do some things and help and make some changes in your portfolio so that you don't feel that stress. And it worked extremely well for them, and his stress level. And I actually could enjoy coming and visiting him because he wasn't bugging me.
Yeah.
But then to watch that, to make that change now, you know both my mom and my mother-in-law both lose their husbands within a couple years of each other, and now they're having to find their way alone, and they need advice. They weren't necessarily the ones that were making all those decisions previously,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
also to see them, they're not stressed. And I've had to tell them, listen, you've made you made good decisions, and you've got resources. Don't stress about it. You've and it's a blessing because they did make some choices in their 50s, 40s and 50s. Really,
Yeah.
in both cases it was a 40, it was later in life, it wasn't in their 20s when they were making, it was in their 40s and 50s that they made some decisions that helped set them up so that they aren't, you know, counting on social security to survive. They can
Yeah.
comfortably live, and it's
Yeah.
so important.
I grew up in a very, two educators. There was always month at the end of the money, it felt like in our household. And there was always stress
Yep.
about that, right? Like, what are we going to do until the next paycheck comes in? And I remember listening in on mom and dad conversations like that made me stress. I never in my life imagined what that stress looks like on the opposite side, right? Where you have individuals who actually have money but they're still stressed because perhaps they live like I did and they know what it was like to be out of money before the month was out. And the last thing on earth they want is to have that stress over a prolonged period of time because they ran out of money before their life was over. And, I don't know. I think I hear what you're
Well,
described. I remember one of my first meetings with a client was somebody who has a pension. It's a great pension, but he didn't understand pensions and he thought he needed an annuity on top of that. And I said, no, no, your pension is
you have it.
amazing. And just reassuring him brought great satisfaction to me and just tremendous calm to him. I think for those of you who are listening who are feeling stress at all about where you are financially, you should meet with a retirement specialist, not a financial planner who's good at accumulation, but a retirement specialist, if for no other reason to do what Bart did for his parents, and that is just to help you understand that it's going to be okay. It's all right taking a little bit of our time to be able to help you. We're here to do that. Don't you think, Bart?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think, and I still have to. I mean, I do it about every month because they forget. They start getting
Yeah.
stressed again. Like, don't worry, nothing's changed. Here you go. This is, everything's good. And and I and it is. It's a blessing for them, to be in that situation. Then I have my mother-in-law. She stresses about leaving a legacy because her husband, they were always concerned about leaving something for their kids. And I've had to tell them many times, listen, her especially, I said, don't worry about it. You don't, your kids are all fine. We're all doing okay. You need, this money is here, and it's there to help you and make sure that you have a quality of life for the next, it could be 10 years. Don't fret about spending money on yourself, and especially on your health. Taking care of yourself. It's okay. And I think that's something too that people get really worried about, leaving a legacy. And there's ways you can do that, um,
Yeah.
through life insurance and other things. If it really is that important, you can look at that. But um, first and foremost, I think, is making sure that we as individuals, um, are taking care of ourselves so that we aren't a burden on the next generation, um, when that time comes.
Yeah, I think one of the greatest legacies many of the seniors can leave to their kids and their grandkids is a memory of a happy grandparent, a grandparent that taught them and showed them how to love life, how to enjoy their retirement, how to be happy and not stress. So I'm sitting here listening and I'm thinking, okay, everyone listening to this right now is saying, okay, Bart is a 35-year executive. He is a public accountant, super smart. What did he say? Like, give me a tip or something. Like, what's the secret soft sauce that helped your father and now your mother and mother in law feel a little bit less concerned about their finances? What are just give me a tip or
Wow.
two. Just share me a little
I don't,
secret. Like, what did you do?
well, I don't know that with my mother and mother-in-law, I've been able to fully get them, like, comfortable. they love to worry. Their mothers, that's what they've been doing for 80 years now. So, but I know with my father, it was sitting down and walking through not only what they had saved and and where they were getting. I mean, and then they were well into their retirement when I was talking to them about some of this at that point. Okay, this is where money's coming from. And these are some things we can do. And here are I don't want to say guarantees. Here are the strengths of going this route down, with these types of investments or these types of assets that you can put in your portfolio. We talked about annuities, and here's some of the things and it got him comfortable with the fact that it's these companies are backed by these promises, by these assets. And you've got to look through, you do have to spend some time knowing the company. There are some wonderful companies out there that have been around for 100+ years. One of the companies that I was with had been around for over 175 years. I mean,
Wow.
that's a lot of history that
Yeah.
has gone on. And so, very stable. But you have to make sure that you feel comfortable there. You don't go blindly into this. um, with my mom's, it's a lot of, on a monthly, like I said, on a monthly basis, sitting saying, you're okay, look at, here's the statement, here's what you got, here's what you spent, you didn't spend hardly anything, you know and or this is the margin that you've got. And I think you
Yeah.
have to just take that time with them.
Yeah, so we have listeners that are wise and smart, and that many of them have a diversified portfolio, and many of them will have annuities, or be at least being approached to have a conversation about that, or life insurance. When you think now, knowing what you know of being in the industry for so long, as you're making a choice as to where you're going to trust your retirement money, or in some case your legacy money with life insurance, what are some of the things that you would look for in carriers? Certainly, the rate itself is not the most important criteria, right?
No, no, but no, it's not it's not the most important, but it's probably the easiest one to start with, right?
Okay.
That that those ratings have been around a long time for a reason, because they do provide a quick look.
Okay, so
Second,
I'm confused, 'cause so just sorry, Bart, I'm gonna stop you.
oh, that's fine.
I was talking about a rate, a commission rate. So not a commission
Oh,
rate, but a
commission rate,
payout rate.
or
But
interest
what
rate.
you're talking,
Actually,
yeah, what you're
absolutely.
talking about is a different kind of rate, a rating that is
Ting.
important. So will you please
Sorry,
divide that
yeah, I
for us?
misunderstood.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at insurance companies are they're rated by various other outside parties, whether it be AM Best or by
Okay.
Moody's, S&P. There's all these different ratings. And I think you need to look at, it's important for the consumer to start with one, looking at that. Is the company rated A? A, B, C, anything. There's a D, but those companies are gone as fast as they get rated a D. So really A, B, C, and B companies, there's ratings within that. There's grades B, B plus, B plus plus, that type of, just depending on who is doing the rating. Um, you really want to have your money with those companies that are rated at least a B plus, and sometimes it's a new company, so they're rated B plus, not because they've got bad investments or risky investments. It's just that they're new, so you may get some
Okay.
of those. But you definitely want to look at the A minus, A plus rated companies. Usually have been around a long time. They have strong assets supporting, and then you need to talk, because yeah, a rate a B rated company may say, hey, I'll offer you, let's pick a number, 5.5% interest. All right. And in today's environment, you go, wow, man, I can't make 5.5 at a bank. Well, yeah, but they may have some risk associated with that. Whereas a A-rated company may only be offering 5 on their annuity. But hey, it's a little bit stronger. They've been around a long time. They've weathered a lot of storms. So I think you have to take your time on that and really get to know. There's lots of resources now with the internet the way it is. You can get a lot of, and I think it's important to go to a independent, you know, agent who represents lots of different companies, and so that you get that full view of what's going on.
So
I
let me pause you there for a second. I want to unpack a couple of these things you've said. Um, so number one is looking at the rating of a company is really important, and I might just kind of pull back to say a company that's been a B and is now a BB, about triple B plus, and it's headed in a direction of towards an A, but it's been rated low because it's a new company, is probably a different type of bet than a company that was an A, has gone through new management, and now
and
is
it's
on
going
its
that
way
way.
down, right? So don't
Absolutely.
necessarily completely discount a company because it's newer and it's improving its rating. But if you want security, if you don't want to worry about that, then you're going to get at even an A minus. An A minus is going to be where you're going to be. That's number one, right?
Right.
And number two, now you're talking about agents, and what you're saying here, I think, is important. That you have many agents who will come and sell you a product because that's kind of the only product they sell, and I think
Correct.
that's probably important to understand. Products change pretty
And
rapidly, and every product is different for every use case. So if you've got an agent who's selling you the same product to every one of his or her clients, it may not be the best product out there. Is that fair?
right. Yeah. Well, and it may not be the right fit for you. Um, it may not be a bad product. May not. It may be a really good product. May be a really good company. It just may not be the right fit for you, and you really need to make sure it's the right fit, um, for your needs, for what you're. And I also think to do this earlier rather than later is better. Many times we start thinking about retirement in our 50s, 60s, right? And that's when we start thinking through some of this. But
Yeah.
in on the life insurance side, the other thing to recognize is that the earlier you buy life insurance, that doesn't happen with annuities, but on the life insurance side, the earlier you buy, the the less of a risk you are to that insurance company. So the actuaries give you a better rate. So you can get a longer product for cheaper. And so, I bought, I bought life insurance, on me when I was in my 20s, that I still have, that was a lot cheaper for me then than
Yeah.
the stuff that I got when I was in my 40s. And I'm older, and so they're like, okay, well, so I think that that's important. But I think it's important to take those steps. I shared this story. One of the things that, why I've been so passionate about this industry for so long is that when I was, oh shoot, how old was I'd been in the industry for about, 10 years. And I had a really good friend of mine that was a neighbor. I mean, lived just just a couple streets over from me. Some of his kids were the same age as my kids, so they hung out together. He was a very successful doctor, or on all appearances, he had a practice, focused on neonatal. I mean, smart guy. Um, but he had sold his practice to one of these companies and was now working for one of a bigger conglomerate of doctors. But all accounts and purposes, very successful. He passed away suddenly. He was in his early 50s, still had all of his kids at home, and he passed away. And as we started to unpack where he was, all his money had been going to lifestyle. There had been no thought of retirement, no thought of what happens if I pass away. The only life insurance product that he had was the 200 or $300,000 policy from being part of that company, and that was it. And so it was a group policy, and that was what they were left with, that they had to pick up the pieces from. It struck me because I sat there and I thought, how many times had we talked about what each of us did in our professions? And here I was leading an life insurance company, and I had never asked him, "Hey, what's your situation? Have you, if what happens to you if you pass away?" And I did
Yeah.
a huge disservice at that time, and it impacted me tremendously. From then on, it was always, okay, where do you stand? All my friends, what do what do I? Not, I'm not going to sell you. I'm not a salesman. I don't know the best product for your situation, but please do something. Please have something in place. And anyway, and I think that going into retirement, it leads a lot of it can relieve a lot of stress if you have those plans in place. So then you now enter into retirement, and now you're looking to try to say, okay, I've got these assets. Now, how do I make them provide me with the lifestyle that the best lifestyle possible, whatever that may be.
Yeah.
Um, so
Do you
anyway,
have a sense for, I think that a lot of people are underinsured on the life insurance side. I think
oh yeah,
they pass away and they think, yeah, my wife is set. She's got $1 million policy. They don't ever stop to think, well,
oh
a $1 million policy produces 40,000, maybe $50,000 a year for him or her to live on, right? I mean, talk to me about
right,
that a little bit.
yeah, no, I think that it's. I mean, there's so many studies that have been done, surveys that have been done that recognize the fact that as a while we are probably one of the most affluent civilizations, right? In the US, we even even those among us who are the poorest are still some of the richest people in the world, um, all things considered. We have not we don't do a good job at looking long term at preparing those things. And so I've seen it time and time again. Somebody, a young father passes away, and he thought he was doing pretty good, but he had, 200, $300,000. Well, that's going to last that family a couple years if they
Mm,
really good, if they really stretch it, and the mom or the dad, whoever the surviving spouse gets, um, goes back to work, and you know, so I think that yeah, it's a huge problem in that right way. And I also think it's the same way you see all the statistics from a retirement standpoint. How many people only have, I think what the average is, less than $100,000 saved for retirement.
yeah.
um, that 100,000 is not going to last very long. Now there's things that we can do to make it stretch, but it's not yeah, I mean, it's human nature. I mean, I don't like talking about my death.
Right.
None of us do. Um, but that doesn't mean it's not going to happen, right? There's only one way you leave this world. So anyway,
So I want to wrap up some things here and kind of summarize a few things, lessons that I learned today. One is from your personal experience. Hey, you need to prepare yourself physically, and also health insurance is, especially if you're not on Medicare yet, health care costs are significantly more than most people anticipate. So getting yourself physically prepared for retirement is as important as financial retirement. I think you've talked a lot about doing what it takes to help you understand what you've got and make sure that you eliminate worries in your retirement. Don't let the worries bother you. Find a trusted source who can really help you through that retirement phase. Um, starting earlier is better than starting later in the process. What other tips would
But
you leave
starting,
people?
but
Yeah,
starting is important. No matter what, it may be later. Just start. You know, action is important. Yeah.
you started. We started this introduction, kind of quoting you, if you would, one of your lines about this idea of planning. A little planning goes a long ways. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, um, I look at I look at my parents, and I say, all right, when they entered into retirement, when my dad got to retirement age, he wasn't ready to retire. He wanted to continue to working, and he worked until he was in his like early 70s. He worked, just because I think part of it was because uh, my mom couldn't stand having him around in full retirement, and I
Yeah.
think we all have that issue. But he loved to work. But he was an insurance salesman. He when in his later part after he like retired from the job that he had, he continued to sell insurance, and most of it was health insurance, but he sold a little bit of life too, and because he loved people, and I think that for him it was he never made a lot of money. We were always just skating by, um, but he did do some planning. He did ensure that he had a little bit socked away, that he put some that he made sure that he had health insurance, that he had life insurance, for the time that he needed it, and he was able to put away a little bit of money that they could live on. And I think that, and so in retirement he was able to enjoy his grandkids and enjoy what he wanted to do, fixing furniture and stuff like that. I am one of the great procrastinators. I admit it, and I think all of us have that in us. There's very few of us that are not procrastinators, and I think that you just need to talk to somebody. If you don't want to talk to somebody, stay up all night on the internet. I mean, it's a beautiful thing about the internet. One of the things that I have seen changed over the years has been the fact that for years insurance companies would not put anything out on the internet. They really they were hesitant to do any technology upgrades at all. It was, I don't know. It was very kind of a weird. One of the problems I had with the industry for a number of years, and I tried to change, and I feel like we did change at our company, but um, now everything's out there, so you don't have to talk to somebody. You can go out on the internet and do a lot of research and really do a lot of planning yourself, and then go talk to an expert and get multiple experts. Don't think that one guy's got the answer, because one guy doesn't have the answer. Even the great, the Warren Buffetts of the world and the Elon Musk, they don't have all the answers. They'll be the first to tell you that. So
Yeah.
you've got to start early and just do a little bit. And I think that it then that compounds. It's just like interest, on your money compounds. You put a little bit of money in, into an account every day. By the time you get to retirement, it's $1 million. Well, it wasn't because you put a lot of money in, it was because the compounding effect. And it's the same with planning. Just do something. Do a little, make sure you have a will, right? I mean, that little bit of planning can really benefit in the future.
Can go a long way. Now with the advent of artificial intelligence, I like to tell clients, listen, don't take my word for it. Don't take another agent's word for you. Take your name and all your personal information out, but then copy the recommendations they're giving you. Ask Chat GPT and ask Claude to take a look at it and say, what do you think about this opinion? And what questions do you have that I should ask about this policy? And
That's
you'll get great questions. You'll get great questions back, and it'll
Yeah.
help you be much wiser in the decision, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the coolest thing about it. We live in a time when we have all this ability to get information, and we don't. It doesn't necessarily need to be biased, right? I mean, it's not your friend next door telling you to do this, or it's not the guy who went coming knocking on your door. It's yeah, but you've also got to think through it too and say, okay, does this make sense for me?
Right.
And
Right.
yeah, it's great.
Well, Bart, trying to capture 35 years of experience into 30 minutes is unfair for our audience and unfair to you. But I really enjoyed spending this time with you and kind of listening and learning from you. If you had one piece of advice to give our audience as they think about their retirement, how to worry less and live longer, what piece of advice would you leave with them?
That old adage of don't put all your eggs in one basket is it's an old adage for a reason. And I think that you need to make sure that uh, you are diversified in your thoughts, right? And that you look at all the various but but anyway, so I to me that's that piece of advice. Your portfolio may not be big. It may You may have started late. You may have had some rough times. It may have I remember in '08, '09 when everything took a dive and everything was 50% of retirement balances were gone, or seemed to be gone. But I also think it's important, not only don't put all your eggs in one basket, but also take a breath. I think many times we make bad decisions when we do that knee jerk reaction, when we are quick to make a decision. There are not, I remember one of my good friends, he told me, listen, there are not many decisions in life that you need to have, uh, or questions that you need to have an instant decision on. And if somebody's trying to get you to make an instant decision, step back, take a few breaths, and you'll find that you probably don't need to make an instant decision on it. And I think that
Love that.
that's
Love that.
so important with our especially with retirement. Take a few breaths. It's okay.
I love that. We'll leave that with them with that. Take a few breaths. Don't be in a hurry. And a little planning goes a long ways.
Yep.
Bart, thank you for being our guest today on this episode, and we appreciate you. For those of you who've listened in, we hope you've enjoyed today. We hope you'll join us again for another episode of Safe Money Radio. And in the meantime, worry a little bit less and live longer. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to Safe Money Radio. If this episode gave you something useful, will you consider sharing it with someone in your life who is close to retirement? That's how the show reaches people who may benefit from our plain language retirement income education. 2 things before you go. The Safe Money Guide is available at no cost at safemoneyradio.com. It's written in plain language, designed to help explain retirement income concepts, and includes how annuities may work. If you are ready for a conversation about your own situation, you can book a no-cost strategy call with a licensed insurance agent in your state directly from safemoneyradio.com. Now, just one word, I actually meet with the first few individuals who apply for a meeting each week on that site. Now, there's no obligation to purchase. The conversation is intended to help you understand your options and whether an annuity may be appropriate based upon your individual circumstances. I'm Brett Blake. Until next week, worry less and live longer.